2024 is slowly coming to an end, and it's this time of the year when a lot of conversations start circling around what can we expect for the real estate spring market in 2025 here in the Greater Milwaukee Area. And this is part 2 of the topic today. If you live in the Greater Milwaukee Area, whether you're currently renting and thinking about buying your first home, or you are thinking about upgrading or downsizing your home, this video is for you. Of course, we don't know yet what the spring market is going to be in detail. And follow my monthly market updates, because I'll keep you updated on the numbers as we go and as they emerge. But real estate is kind of slow moving, and we have a lot of leading indicators that can tell us what we can expect from next year. I've been doing this for over 10 years in the Milwaukee market, and I'm kind of a data guy. I almost said data nerd. You can, I think, tell from my monthly market updates. And there are a lot of things on a very high level that kind of set the boundary conditions for what we can expect next year for the spring market. This is part 2. I posted part 1 about a week ago, and you can watch them in either order, doesn't really matter. Today we're going more into inventory, supply and demand here in the Milwaukee area. Where's inventory coming from? What can we expect there? Is there going to be more inventory? What does that mean for prices? And also, what are the early forecasts for mortgage interest rates? Because also that will have a huge impact on what we can expect in 2025. So I would say let's get started. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is always inventory, because inventory kind of gives you the snapshot on where the market is, and we measure inventory in terms of months. So that's kind of like looking at your fridge and see how much milk you have and saying, okay, this is enough for a week or for 2 weeks. And we measure inventory the same way. We're talking about months of inventory. And you can see a long-term chart that goes back into the 90s. And we are currently right here. We are in a seller's market because we have still low inventory. In a balanced market, we would expect about 5 to 6 months worth of inventory. And in a buyer's market, a lot of inventory, more than 7 months of supply. Famously, we have seen this here, and this is US data, so not specifically for Milwaukee. We've seen this in 2008, 2009, 2010, lots of inventory. And of course, prices coming down. If there is so much inventory, buyers get to negotiate. This is why it's called a buyer's market. And the last years we have been in the seller's market. So really sellers have been in charge and were able to dictate prices, and buyers were competing. This is why we've seen prices going up. Inventory was just scarce. And when you look here, this is US national data. You can see that the inventory situation has been improving over the last years. Real estate is really slow moving in that regard. When you look at it, takes 2 or 3 years before you actually see a trend emerging and moving in a different direction. It will be more clear when we look into some of the driving forces behind that. But I want to show you something, because this is national data and real estate is always very local. So let's take a look what this looks like specifically for the Milwaukee area. So we also see the same pattern, that inventory got less and less and less since 2015. And we're kind of hitting the low, and we are just going sideways. There's a little bit of an improvement in 2024 in terms of inventory. It's trending up a little bit, but inventory is a lot more scarce than it is in Milwaukee than in the rest of the country. So when you hear something in the evening news and they're talking about the real estate market is doing this, the real estate market is doing that, take it with a grain of salt, because the markets are so different in the US. When you look at the East Coast, what's happening in New York, in Boston, or at the West Coast, or in Florida and Texas, those are all such vastly different markets. Many of them are a lot more expensive than Milwaukee. So it's really important that you look at local data and understand what's happening locally here in southeastern Wisconsin. So inventory is the main thing, because that tells you the whole picture. And inventory is telling you how much of a negotiation power you have, either as a buyer or a seller. It impacts both, of course. And it also tells you where prices is going. This is why I think it's the most important parameter to take a look at. Let's take a look at demographics, because the real estate market is really influenced by a shift in demographics. And the nice thing is this is highly, highly predictable, because we're all getting older every year. There's just no way around it. and people are going through the life cycle. They're buying their first home, their second home, then maybe what we call their trophy home. They're raising the kids, sending the kids off to college, and then maybe they're downsizing, getting into a condo, maybe even going back downtown, and eventually they're selling that place too. And possibly going into some sort of assisted living situation. So this is very important to understand, because we are right now in a market where millennials are the number one buyers. We all have been conditioned to think millennials are college kids. That's no longer true. The oldest millennials are turning 41 years now, if you believe it, and they changed their strategy on real estate a few years ago. Initially, they were all saying we rent. And relatively quickly, a lot of them changed their mind and said, no, we're done renting, we want to buy. Of course, changes in family. You get older, you get married, you have kids. Renting is suddenly not such a good idea anymore. And once they have made up their mind to buy a piece of real estate and stop renting, they may not execute it right away, but once they have set that goal, they are usually not going back to renting and following that strategy. So millennials are the largest demographic group that we have in the US, and they are currently the number one buyers. Gen Z is following right behind them, and the oldest Gen Zs are already starting buying homes. Gen Zs are behaving a little bit different. They don't have the hesitation on buying that the millennials had, because they grew up during 2007, 2008. So they've seen the real estate, the subprime mortgage crisis back then. And real estate was not a great topic at the time. So that really shaped their worldview. And so that's why they were all going into renting. But Gen Z is coming right behind. And then when you look at the baby boomers, that is the generation that is currently buying and selling. They're either staying where they are or they are downsizing. But from an inventory point of view, that doesn't really change anything. If you buy one, sell one, that is a wash. Inventory is really coming from the silent generation. They are supposed to be the number one sellers, but you can see in this chart very easily that they are the smallest generation. So just from a quantity point of view, there are just not enough sellers here in that range. Then we have buyers, because this is a much, much smaller demographic segment. You can see less than 24 million compared to over 82 million. So the math is not really working out here. And the other thing that's not helping is that the older generations now prefer to actually stay in their house, make some accommodations, remodel it maybe, but they want to stay in place and age in place. So that is one reason why inventory is so slow to come on the market. And that is really creating that shortage, and that of course has also an impact on prices. Let's take a look what that means for our local Milwaukee area. So when you look at the Greater Milwaukee area, including the three surrounding counties, we have a total of 1.6 million people living here. And you can just use statistical data and break that down. So we have about 352,000 millennials living here in Milwaukee. And when you say roughly 10% are buying a home every year, that would be somewhere around 35,000 millennials that want to buy a home every year. Maybe it's more. The issue is that in Milwaukee, or in the Greater Milwaukee area, we are selling only about 10 to 12,000 houses every year. So if you have about 30 or 40 or 50,000 buyers and you have only 10 or 12,000 homes being sold every year, that is an imbalance that just doesn't work. And millennials are not the only ones buying, because you also have the older Gen Z that are already entering the housing market. You still have a few Gen Xers, my generation, who are interested in buying a home. And then, of course, all of them are also competing with the boomers who might be downsizing and looking either at a condo or at a smaller home, because they don't need that big 5,000 square foot home in Mequon anymore. So that is really the underlying issue that we have. Household formation is driving this. So a lot of people are still renting. They want to get out of the rental situation. We're in such competitive market. Rents are going up every year. And so they're making the decision. They want to buy a house, but in a lot of cases, they haven't been able to execute on that. Mortgage rates are a part of that, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But before I get there, let's take a look at new construction. So this is a chart that shows you new construction in the US all the way back to the 1970s. And we usually have around 1 million new homes, single-family homes built every year. That's kind of the 50-year average here. And that is what we need, because we're losing homes to natural disasters, to fires, to just being old and falling down to the point where you can't rehab them anymore. And of course, we also have population growth. So that's the reason why we need that. And our builders kind of really stopped building here around 2010, 2011, after the subprime mortgage crisis. A lot of them actually went out of business, and they really reduced single-family home construction in the US. And we've been below that average for 14 years straight now. And so we've been digging ourselves inventory-wise into a hole. This is roughly about 4 million houses that we're missing in the US. There are different statistics out there depending, who you believe. There are studies from Goldman Sachs. There is data from the government, from HUD. There are different institutions that are researching that, and they go between 3 and 6.5 million. I'm going with the middle, which is about 4 million homes that we are currently short. If you divide it by 50, just for an average back of the napkin math, how much we are missing in Wisconsin, you're looking at 68,000 homes that we're short in Wisconsin. And most of them are typically built in the southeast areas around the Milwaukee metro area. And I think it's no secret to you, if you drive around, you see that we don't have a whole lot of new construction. If you look on the MLS at any given point in time this year, we had maybe around 200, 220 spec homes that were in the process of being marketed for sale. So that is not even scratching the surface if you look at a deficit of 68,000 homes in the southeastern or in the Wisconsin market. And this is slow changing. Contractors are a rare commodity these days. So builders are kind of working at their capacity. They have a hard time finding contractors. And when we look at houses that are currently under construction, a client of mine was recently making a comment when we were looking at a house in Menomonee Falls, and the carpenters were there just installing the kitchen. And he said, on the way out, he said, "Marcus, did you notice the age of the contractors?" And I'm like, yeah, this is kind of typical. Carpenters are usually in their 50s, in their early 60s. You don't see a lot of young guys entering the trades. So this is really becoming a bottleneck for the supply side. It will take us years to resolve that. I don't really see a clear path how this is going to happen. We have to change zoning laws. We need to build smaller homes. First-time homebuyers are not really buying $600,000 single-family homes, and we need more contractors to do all that. So filling this gap here will require that we're going into overdrive for a little while and go into an overproduction before we can fill up that gap, and that will take a while. Experts are talking about 10 years to fill up that deficit. So that is definitely a macro trend that is in place and that will not change between now and next year in spring. Let's take a look at interest rates. So we have some projections here for 2025 mortgage rates from Fannie Mae, from the Mortgage Banker Association, and from Wells Fargo. And on the right side, I am always averaging the three of them out for you. Take a look at the green marked area here. That's for spring of next year. And we are getting down, supposedly, if the forecasts are correct, below 6% into the high fives. And that is significant because last year in October, we hit 7.5%, 8%. A lot of people paused their home search and said, okay, we'll wait for rates to come down. And when they are asked, then many of them are telling us that below 6% is really what they are looking before they get back into the market. Here's a study from Bankrate that gives you the answers here. So when are you ready to buy? When are you comfortable? Less than 6%, 52% gave that answer. Less than 5%, 47%. So somewhere in here, a lot of them will come back into the market that are currently not in the market. And we currently already have more buyers than we have sellers. If we look on the seller side, you see a similar picture because most sellers are also buyers, especially boomers. If they're selling a home, they need to buy a home, they need to move somewhere, live somewhere, and they are currently handcuffed to a really nice mortgage with maybe 2.75, 3% interest rate. So it's hard to give up that very, very low mortgage rate and buy a new house and then enter into a 7 or 8% mortgage. So now we're coming down into the fives. That gap is not that big anymore, and that will bring us more inventory. We have seen a little bit already this year. If you follow my monthly market updates, you see that we have currently more inventory than we had in the last 4 years, and that is coming a little bit from this effect. There's also pent-up supply, people that wanted to make a move but didn't do it last year. So in 2024, that started breaking loose, and I think we're going to see more of that in 2025. And that also lines up with the big forecast, the big experts, the banks, and the government. So the consensus of that is that we're going to see next year about 5.4 million homes sold in the US. Probably a similar trend in the Milwaukee area. So overall, we'll go back to selling a few more homes. We had 40% fewer transactions than we normally have in Milwaukee in the last 2 years. So very, very tight market. Not a whole lot of exchanges between buyers and sellers. I think with more inventory, that is going to loosen up, and we're going to see more transactions next year. In terms of home price expectations, again, this is a survey for all of the US, and the average of all 10 for next year is 2.6% appreciation. You have that here on the blue bar. That is lining up with what we have seen about this year, 2.7%. That's a national average, because we had a lot of markets that were running so hot during 2021 and 2022 that they came down and consolidated a little bit. Milwaukee has outperformed them over the last years. We have seen between 6 and 8% appreciation. Depends a little bit in which municipality you are. Whitefish Bay is different than West Allis or Germantown. So the local markets are also playing a role here. Big picture here, Milwaukee home price trends, that is the green line. You can see here data reaching back to 2015. First thing that stands out is we have a very predictable seasonal pattern, and it's so important to understand this. This is why I keep showing this chart here. Right now, it's kind of season end clearance sale, and there are good deals to be had. We are under contract with 12 transactions right now. Some of them are actually really good deals that, in that form would not have happened in the spring market. So if you're opportunistic, if you're willing to go against the grain, fall is a really good time for savvy buyers. Selling, of course, is best in spring, in particular in early spring. And if you compare the green line, which is our Milwaukee market, with the national average, you can clearly see that the US kind of ran hot here during COVID. Prices really accelerated crazy fast. And the last years, we have seen a little bit of a side trend here for the national. Milwaukee is still about 30% lower compared to the national average. So there are many markets out there where homes cost 5 to almost 10 times more than in the Milwaukee market. The red line here is just the national average. And if you travel a little bit, I think there is no reason why Milwaukee real estate should be trading for below average, because Milwaukee is really far from being a below average city. So over the next 10 years, I think we will see these two curves kind of merging together, and Milwaukee will probably get caught up with where national real estate is. So the seasonality is also very predictable. So right now we are on the downtrend, so we're getting somewhere down here, and we will see the step up next year in spring market, as we have seen very reliably over the last 10 years. There is nothing on the radar that is telling me that this is going to be different for 2025. So if you're currently making plans and you're thinking about what to do maybe next year, then feel free to reach out to me, have a conversation with me, because your personal situation really makes a big difference in what the best strategy for you is. What are your preferences? What does your family need? What are some other boundary conditions that are impacting your life? And once I understand this, I can help you map out the strategy that is right for you personally, whether it's your first time buying a home or you are buying and selling at the same time. Then we need to work out the logistics. We should talk about what improvements you should make. Probably more importantly, what improvements you should not be making. A lot of times I have to talk sellers out of spending a lot of money on expensive rehab projects that are not really necessary and won't really give them that much of a lift. So we have not a very good return on investment. So those are the conversations. The earlier you bring me in, the more I can help you strategically in laying a plan out. And you can very easily get a hold of me. Here's my email address, m.auerbach@kw.com. A lot of people prefer reaching out with an email, but you can also also go to our website, onpointrg.com. There are a lot of resources there you can download. I have, for example, here our Milwaukee First-Time Homebuyers Guide with a lot of really good information that it's not fluff. It's really good tips and tricks and explains the home buying process here specifically for the Milwaukee market. We also have a guide for seller. We have a relocation guide. And of course, you can schedule an appointment with me directly, either a Zoom call or a phone call. Just click on that schedule a showing with Marcus and you have access to my calendar and you can just pick a time that works for you. And I'll see you then. That's all I had for you today. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you at the next one.